I'm going to open the panel discussion. So Başak, MPG's head of research, will moderate the panel. We have 5 speakers, so maybe you can raise your hand or make a little a movement. We have Melis Ari from Finland, who's a community organizer and migrant rights defender, representing today Moniheli network of multicultural organizations. We have Thomas Huddleston, scientific collaborator from the University of Liege and a long-term partner and staff at MPG. We have Yonous Muhammadi, who's the director of the Greek Forum for Refugees. We have Asif from the European Coalition of Migrants and Refugees and the Center for Capacity Building and Empowerment in Sweden. And we have Ojeaku and Nwabuzo, who's the co-director of INAR, the European Network Against Racism. So Başak, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel. Sinem, thank you very much for this thorough review of the evidence on this issue. And having seen the big picture regarding the participation gap, I'm actually thrilled to be here moderating this discussion with our speakers who are actually practitioners with hands-on experience with various migrants groups in numerous countries of Europe. And we have a lot to talk about. We would like this to be a conversational discussion on, excuse me, the obstacles as well as ways to overcome them. And I'd like to also invite our audience to put their questions in the chat box as well, while we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the panel. Still, it's good to sometimes see the questions. Sometimes speakers prefer to answer them in the chat box, and we can group them and ask them also at the end. So that would be a good way to save time and get to as many questions as we can. Having said that, I would like to turn directly to our participants, our speakers in particular, who have quite an experience with different dimensions of this policy gap, which they try to address. We have migrant rights defenders, activists who have worked on campaigns at the national level or local level. We also have people who have researched this issue and speakers who have tried to mobilize groups of migrants. So let me start with the more local or national campaign work so that we have a bit of a comparative picture from the different cases. So I'll turn first to Melis, who is a migrant rights defender, and I'd like to hear from her based on the campaign of the Finnish national elections, maybe the work that you have done there, or your other experience recently. What worked for you to encourage electoral participation of new Europeans, and what would be your recommendations for the 2024 European Parliament elections? So finishing the long question right there.
Thank you, Başak, and thank you, Sinem, as well for the presentation beforehand. And thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. So yes, I'm representing Moniheli, a network of multicultural organizations in Finland today, where in 2015, actually, we started a campaign called Our Election. And that was the time also during the EU elections when we tried to make the non-EU citizens who actually do not have the right to vote in EU elections more active in the EU elections. So we are talking about an election where they don't have the right to vote, and our aim was to involve them so their voices could be heard as well, because there is also in Europe more than 23 million non-EU citizens residing here, where at the parliament level decisions are made on behalf of them without actually them being involved in the elections themselves. So how can we make their voices be heard? That was our objective in Our Elections campaign, which afterwards actually continued also in the national and even municipal elections. We took the model to promote voting and being involved in elections in general. Well, to start with those who do not have the right to vote, how can we involve them in a democratic process where they do not have the right to vote. We organized platforms where candidates could listen those residents who cannot vote. So it wasn't also in the platform the participants who asked the questions to the politicians, but it was rather the politicians asking questions to the people, what message you would like to be taken to Brussels, for example. It wasn't easy to get the politicians because they are after their own campaigns, they want the votes, and it wasn't easy to trick them to get to a platform where they would be talking to people who are not actually voters. But we used also methods to trick them because we recorded those. We also said this is going to be watched by the voters as well, making sure they would attend, they would like to attend. We involved also the people who do not have the right to vote in campaigns, because voting is, after all, is just one way to participate in electoral campaigning period. They campaigned for people, we had spokespeople, they also encouraged their neighbors, their colleagues to go out there and vote. So we made sure that within our communities, those who did not have the right to vote would take part and their voices would be heard. Afterwards, what we used in our elections campaign was in Finland especially, and this is very similar in other countries as well, that voting is a very individual practice. In Finland, it's also said that it's a secret. You don't tell anybody who you vote. It's your own personal choice. And it's something people do at most with their family members on an election day and go and vote. And it's a very individual habit. We turned this around and we actually organized joint voting events. So we would meet with our communities. There would be, in some cities there would be tens, in some cities there would be more people gathered together with also our pancards that we are going to vote, to show also that to the rest of the society that we are active and we are voting. And it would be very encouraging to a lot of community members who would not necessarily go there individually to vote, but be part of a community. It's done together. It's a celebrative moment. So we would go and vote together, which would also help within the process as well. If somebody would have a question of, how do I put the stamp or something, like we would brief them in advance and go and vote together. And after that, we would also have a nice get-together event, which really worked. And this has been actually now kind of a practice we have taken on in each elections. And that's also something fun. What was also very successful in our elections campaign was our discussions with the Ministry of Justice, who every year sends the first-time voters a letter, meaning to 18-year-olds in Finland. The ministry who's responsible of the elections would send, welcome, this is your first time, you'll be voting, please use your vote. And in our discussions, we asked why new citizens would not be receiving a similar letter, that welcome, you're a Finnish citizen now, and you have the right to vote for the first time, and you use your vote letter. And this went through, and after actually 2015, in every elections, Ministry of Justice has been sending to new citizens this letter, and it has been an empowering letter for those who have gotten the citizens. It's an acknowledgement from the decision makers, and it's something that if they haven't thought of voting at the latest, then they have wanted to use their voice. So those are some practical things I would say at this moment. I would maybe add I'm sure I'll have maybe a few more minutes afterwards, but I would also like to say, because it was so many times mentioned of the second generation migrants, we like to refer as first generation Europeans or first generation Finnish citizens instead of second generation migrants. So I would really like to see this narrative also change and refer to new Europeans as first generation Europeans.
Thank you, Melis. This was actually also a great presentation of a campaign that is exactly addressing the different individual, institutional, and sociological challenges, obstacles that Sinem has outlined in her presentation. And you have clearly studied all of these obstacles thoroughly and tackled them one by one. Quite inspirational. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. I'd like to now turn to Yonous from the Greek Forum for Refugees, who is also involved in campaigns. So maybe you would like to reflect us a bit on this question as well. What worked for you to encourage electoral participation of new Europeans, and how would your recommendations be followed based on this experience?
Thank you very much. I think it is a little bit different, the situation here in Greece and our experience here. The first, I think it is the first problem that we have here, and as a barrier, that is the right to vote. So before to start, I want to introduce myself. Also, Yonous Muhammadi. I'm representing Greek Forum of Refugees, which is now an association of refugee communities and individuals. It started back in 2002 and in 2003 as a movement of asylum seekers and refugees from the parks. On that time, that there was no reception centers. And in 2012, actually, because of the needs for refugees to have an agency and to advocate for inclusion and active participation, so we established and became an association and network of refugee and migrant communities. So in last 10 years, I can say that we have started to work on electoral participation and the right to vote. It is the problem that just those with citizenship here, they can vote even in national election, not just in local election. In local, national, and European election, in regional, in all elections, you should have citizenship. Otherwise, you cannot vote. It means that we don't have very large numbers of migrants and migrant communities that they have the right to vote, which is one of the biggest problems. But again, we have migrants that have the right to vote. They have the nationality. For example, Albanians, that they are for a long time here. We have some 100,000 with more than 200,000 of Albanians that they have the right to vote. And also we have communities from Pakistan and India, that numbers of them that they have the right to vote. So first, from our experience to see from this decades, I can say that there have been good steps taken in this 10 years that we see practically in Greece. For example, in first years in 2010, and then it was difficult to approach the parties here and coalitions here in order to include a migrant candidate in this in the elections. So it was our effort in order to approach the parties. But nowadays that we see in this election that now we have actually approached from parties, and they are asking to include peoples with migrants and refugee background to be as a candidate with their in the elections, which is really, it means that now it is a trend for parties to have refugees and migrants in their election. But of course, there is a problem, but still, because we don't see a meaningful participation of refugees and migrants as candidates in this party, because it is just like a kind of tokenism and having as a shadow migrants and refugees in the list of candidates, that we don't see a meaningful and a real support from the parties in order for these people to, or to campaign for these people to really being elected or being voted. And here, actually, that I want to say that maybe it is an important question also, or a title for another workshop or training, to say that how to get out the vote of all Europeans for the new European candidates. I think it is also one subject that we can discuss on this, because we have experience, and I think most of the communities, they have experience for this also. So yes, we as form of refugees, we participated in part of a campaign, Vote Europa, Vote Europe. It was really interesting for us that member of us, actually, they didn't have the right to vote for these elections. So they were on the street and asking those who had the right to vote and asking them to vote for Europe. I think it was really not just a campaign to vote Europe, and also the first step to advocate that, yeah, I don't have the to vote, that we start to advocate also for the right to vote in for migrants and refugees, at least at national level. Of course, so I'm coming more practically from our experience to say about the barriers, and especially about this title that you put, it is important how to get out the vote of migrants for the European elections. I think from our experience, it is a legal barriers. I can see structural and institutional barriers, that it means that you don't have the right to vote. I think that is the biggest problem, that especially here in Greece, but not just in Greece, and also in some other European countries, and also it is one of the biggest problem for peoples. And not just for European and national elections, and also in national elections, we see those who have the right to vote in some European countries that we are in contact in terms of documentation, and also there are problems that people officially they have the right to vote, but they cannot complete this process of documentation in order to vote for for the elections. And also, of course, we have this integration challenge for migrants and refugees. When we speak about integration challenge, especially here in Greece, we don't have actually an integration policy. So integration means actually creating sense of belonging. Participating in an electoral process or to voting, it means that there should be a sense of belonging. Sense of belonging comes out when there is an integration policy, when there is a willing from the central government, I can say, in order to have an integration policy, in order to create, to give the chance for migrants and refugees staying in this country to feel that it is their country, in order to be active citizens and they have active and effective participation in all process of the society, including, of course, this electoral process. So in terms of practical barriers, which I can say through the experience of, it is not a study, a research or something, it is through our life experience as my colleagues, as myself also, that I was candidate, I was running for European election in 2019. I can say that what we see as what I saw and my colleague we saw as a problem, it is a kind of distrust mostly to the system also, I can say. And people cannot trust very well. There are many reasons. The first, for example, in Greece, generally there is not a trust to the political system, but peoples with refugee background, especially because their background, they are coming from a country with which there is not democracy and there is a authoritarian government. So this trust building, it is really important. And also it is a fear of discrimination. Maybe you cannot think about this, but for migrants and refugees, that they have experienced this hate speech or a kind of discrimination in public services or everywhere. So standing in a line to vote, it is an issue for them. It is a challenge for them that everyone looks at them that, yeah, why you are here? You are not Greeks, for example. So this feeling of discrimination also, it is a kind of as a barrier that I found to the communities that they have the right to vote, but they didn't go to vote. It is one of the problems. Another problem, it is community. It is communities as communities are not involved, and a community outreach. I can say that the voters, they don't approach the communities. And we see that if you don't approach the communities, and there are problems in the communities, actually there should be training, and I can see a kind of education for voting, that it is needed. So how it can be done, of course, if there is a strategy of community approach, and in order understanding the community, and also how to plan the messaging, and also to according to these communities to bring communities to vote. So that is also.
It would be great if you could expand on this very point on the second round, because I think this really speaks to the heart of the recommendations that we are bringing up. And thanks so much for bringing also the issue of standing for elections and what is on paper and what happens on the ground difference. Those are also the issues that we are trying to tackle in this project, the New Europeans Initiative. And one of the dimensions of it is, as Isabel has briefly summarized, the political participation indicators that we're building as an extension, as a larger index for measuring political participation departing from MyPEX. And so it is, and we're trying to incorporate these very two issues that you have also raised. From Greece, if you allow me, I would like to go back to Scandinavia, this time to Sweden, and hear from Asif about, especially who has a lot experience with at the local level with elections, and also political participation of migrants in general. Today he's representing European Coalition of Migrants and Refugees, as well as the Center for Capacity Building and Empowerment in Sweden. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Başak, and everyone who is taking part, and also the panelists who are already giving some nice information and be part of the discussion. Actually, I'm representing two organizations today, and one that I'm leading, starting from the very student life, when students and refugees and migrants who are new to the society were not representing in a full way, not only in the local bodies, but also on the national level, as well as generally about their rights and representations. And the second that I'm part of is the European Coalition, which is part of Global Refugee Network. It is a global network of refugees, and we are representing Swedish, the European chapter of it. Coming to the point of discussion, that we should understand first that what are actually the issues, that why migrants are not as active as they should be as part of their representations. I would start off with Sweden, basically, because in Sweden there is a very big migrant and refugee population, and it's probably 2 or 3 generations now that are living in Sweden. But they are not really active, and there have been many reasons behind that. And the most important reason that is that if they are not actually themselves empowered or having the confidence buildings among themselves, among the refugees, because of the policies, because of the many factors they are having already, then they don't feel confident to vote itself. So forgetting about EU voting, they don't even know sometimes, but most of the times, that why they are voting and what they are voting for, and if what they are voting for, if that there will be counted or not. There are policies that look rather in favor of the newcomers in the society, but basically when one look at that, it is not as good as it should be. And that is actually not creating trust among the newcomers in the society. Like in Scandinavia and in Sweden, there is a closed system of language that if you want to integrate in the society, you have to learn Swedish language. If you don't speak good Swedish, or you cannot communicate in Swedish in a writing way, you cannot be part of society in a holistic way. And the refugees, migrants, and the newcomers of the society, or the new Europeans even, they are just running after the fact that first they should be recognized as the citizens or the inhabitant of the country, rather than going the next stage, and which is that they are part, first they should consider themselves to be the part of society, then think about the rest of the things. So voting become like something over their mentality and the mind, because most of the newcomers of the society are not either coming from a war background or an economic instable background, or countries where economic turmoil is very normal. So they take Sweden as their second home, just like other European countries. So their basic requirements and understandings are totally different than what we are talking about right now. I talked about confidence building measures, which is important in a sense that if they are not integrated in society, they don't have confidence in the local parties. If they don't have confidence in the local parties, they will not look beyond that. And many new Europeans even don't know what European Union voting is actually. Even if they don't know about how, would that be a difference if they vote in Sweden? Would that make a difference, or how good it is for them, or they are identifying or clarifying their own future? So the CBMs, the confidence measures, are very important, and it can start from the grassroots level. Of course, there are things that are not done yet, should be done. The first thing is that a lot of ambiguity between political parties at local level and national level, because there is debates among the parties, but some are far right and some are far left or left parties, and there is a kind of situation that they further confuse the voters and newcomers, that okay, if they are voting, why they are voting and for whom they are voting. And then the next step is that they don't have people who can take the confidence out to them. For example, in the previous election in Sweden, there was a new party that was introduced in the south of Sweden, and that was purely led by an immigrant. And all the members of the parties that candidating in the election were migrant background or refugee or newcomers to Sweden, and they got around 30% of the votes generally, in which the areas, in all those areas where the migrant vote is very popular, or migrants are living in a very big background, big numbers. So it, like the inclusion of this new party into the society, proved that migrants are looking for a party or people whom they can trust, or probably they can trust those people easily compared to the local Swedes or the ethnic Swedes who are already part of society. So this is one of the points that they are for sure getting along and coming to vote. I think my time is up, so I will take it later on.
Perfect. Thank you, Asif. Thanks also for bringing up the issue of trust that Yonous has also started the discussion on, and it is something that affects both the migrant communities with migration background and those who are not. And I think this is also important in discussing the barriers to overcome in the next round. But without further ado, I actually would like to ask the same question I've been asking about the what works for encouraging electoral participation of new Europeans, what worked for you, what would be the recommendations from our very own Thomas Huddleston, who has been doing a great research at Migration Policy Group before, and also led this Vote Europa campaign. And it's great to have you here with us today. And I'd like to hear more about this campaign and also your recent work on this issue area in relation to the question that I asked. I'm sure you have a lot to reflect on, especially when it comes to mobilization dimension. I'm all ears.
Great. Well, thank you, Başak. Thanks to MPG for reaching out. So I think that this new Vote Europa campaign from your New European Initiative is going to offer a lot of really useful tools and information. So this is just kind of the start of a discussion as everyone is thinking about how they can make campaigns before the election. So I'm going to talk more about the how. First is the messengers are as important as the message to build trust among new voters. And we've heard that from all of our colleagues. So the first point is that immigrant leaders and immigrant-led organizations need to be the main partners. They need to be leading and designing these initiatives. They need the support, also financially, in order to do this. And we need to be working together in a coalition. It's not any one of us with our initiative that's going to make the impact. So how did MPG try to do this through research action before with the Vote Brussels and the Vote Europa campaign? So the Vote Brussels campaign involved training 100 volunteers from different immigrant communities across the capital of Europe, which is the most diverse city in the democratic world. And by training them, coordinating them, motivating them, we were able to double the voter registration rate for non-Belgian citizens in the local elections, and a third of those voters came from our campaign, according to our estimation. And that involved a lot of face-to-face, going to people where they were, in their organizations, in their markets, in their places of business, online, through social media. And basically trying to create viral conversations, word of mouth, directly between communities, working a lot with multilingual media, ethnic media, the media that immigrants actually listen to. In the Vote Europa campaign took a different tack. There we worked with 11 democracy fellows, also from the Greek Forum of Refugees, in specific countries, and we were able to reach 40 million young, diverse voters, and in those countries get higher voter participation rates and higher numbers of new voters among particularly mobile EU citizens by helping immigrant leaders make really powerful videos that they could be sharing with their networks, getting the kind of key information that they needed in order to create viral social media content. So really it was by lifting up voices of leaders and giving them the key information that we were able to have an effect. My second recommendation is we are not there to inform people, we are there to mobilize them. And I think that too often researchers, policymakers, practitioners think that basically you have to go to university in order to be a voter. And we end up providing too much information, overwhelming people and reinforcing the perception that there are a lot of obstacles to vote, and that actually voting isn't really for them, that you've got to be a highly informed voter in order to have the rights of being a citizen. So it's our job to make voting simple, all of us. We have to digest all of the complicated information. We need to work with authorities so they produce better official multilingual materials. But we need to come up with a very simple set of pitches. So for example, in the Vote Brussels campaign, we were telling people, did you know that non-Belgians make up 300,000 voters in this city? We could be a third of the voters, and to get elected, you only need 300 votes as a city councillor. Communes have more powers here than they do anywhere in Europe. And in order to vote, all you have to do is fill in this simple form, send it by email, give it to me, and you can register or deregister whenever you want. There are no sanctions or risks to voting. So you're going to find out what's the kind of key information and motivation that new voters need in your particular area. Your information, again, should focus on the power that they have, their numbers, the competences, the stakes of this election, the issues that are greatest priority to them. You should also think about what the risks are. As several speakers have said, there's a lot of misinformation that goes on. People think that they're going to lose their right to reside. They think that they could be the object of violence. They think that there are other types of sanctions for voting. So you have to address those myths, and you got to make this fun. You've got to find different ways of reaching people through videos, through games, through festivals, but make sure that you're building that empowering message so that your messengers make sure that they're giving people the simple information that they need. And one last point, work with authorities to make it as simple to vote, because what we did is we didn't just lecture people. We went around with those forms and we got people to fill them in. So at the moment they were convinced, they filled out the form, we could send it in, they could send it by email. We have to do as much as possible to remove those obstacles and get people moving into action.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I'm sure that many of our participants are convinced by your messages and actually are considering both to vote more seriously and to stand up for elections. Thank you for those 2 points on mobilization and who the messengers are. And with this, I would like to turn to Ojeaku, the co-director of European Network Against Racism, who actually has participated in the Vote Europe mobilization efforts. And please tell us more about this and what's worked for you in your efforts to increase the participation gap.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for this invitation. It's a real honor to hear from the other panelists and also to contribute to this discussion. And actually, in preparation for this workshop, I did actually consult with my team and one of our former great colleagues, Juliana Walgren Santos, to actually reflect on what we had done in the past in previous European elections in 2014 and 2019. To see what was working and what wasn't working, and we're also developing our project for 2024. So it's with this information that I come to you with a kind of like a broad overview, because I didn't specifically work on the elections in 2019. But if you understand also that ENAR is a network of 150 plus organizations, anti-racist organizations. And what I was told and what I believe is that we really have to do the engagement work with our network, with the organizations on the ground, that do the political participation work, that do the registration of voters work, and we can support them in that activities. And I think that's where we have an added value, where we've been successful. Specifically in 2014, which was providing those resources to our members to hold events, roundtables with policymakers, but also providing training, because I think, and I agree with Thomas, it's a very special kind of mobilization work that you have to do around elections, and it's not the same as our normal engagement work. So we provided training for our members specifically around mobilization around the elections, to ensure that the there were opportunities for discussions to be had at a local level. I think other panelists have also communicated about the need for local people to talk to themselves about the issues. And I think that's really important. And ENAR is a network of organizations, and I'm based in Brussels. We are here as a secretariat, but we cannot go into each member state and do that discussion. We can, our best way forward is to provide the resources for those organizations to do it themselves. And secondly, we cannot campaign specifically for any political candidate. So a lot of our work is supporting and resourcing the network, but also then doing the advocacy work at a European level, and doing those joint work, broad coalitions, developing our political demands, making sure that they're very clear for not only potential candidates, but also that they represent what our members have decided are the most crucial and critical things that they want the parliamentarians to stand on. So this is also the work that we do. It's a little bit of translation, what comes from the ground, we put together, and then we communicate at a European level. And one thing is clear, is that migration as a policy area is a very hot topic. We have done a lot of research looking at migration and how it has been used by political parties in various ways to either get support and sometimes with an anti-migrant rhetoric. So we have to be careful as well how migration is used by political parties. And this is some of the work that we do at ENAR. I think another thing that we find really important is to understand this urgency that is needed to vote to ensure that there is a higher voter turnout. It'd be interesting to know, I don't know if anyone knows exactly why there was such an increase in 2019 at European elections. I'm very interested to know about that. Follows probably on from the Brexit vote, which also had a huge turnout. And I think that's very interesting around those campaigns, is like to explain to voters what the real issues are and what is at stake, whether they choose to vote or not, and how they vote. And I think it's really important that ENAR does that communication, and we can do that in a broad way from our platform to ensure that there is a higher voter turnout. But I really think a lot of our work is about encouraging brave political leadership, so that political parties do follow our key recommendations, so that people do feel they have a reason to vote. Of course, we are doing some assessment of the diversity in European Parliament. We did that in 2019. And we estimated that there were around 10% of the population were from racialized groups, and that about 5% of the European parliamentary candidates were from racialized groups. So there's a gap there in representation. And I think that is what needs to be addressed by the political parties. And I don't know if you want me to go into some of the recommendations, or we do another round, or I can...
Yeah, a second round would be...
Yeah, great. Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Ojeaku. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for giving us a very inspirational tour of their experiences, their work, and the way they tackled this issue in their own work, and also help us understand and help us to be encouraged not to be scared of these obstacles that we have been counting, and how they can be overcome. So having seen what they have done to overcome these obstacles, maybe it's also timely to have a discussion of what else needs to be done, and especially by policymakers to overcome these barriers. And I'd like to, we are a bit over time, so I would like to hear more shortly from our participants, in the same order that maybe I ask questions, not to confuse anyone, and then we can turn to our audience who've been our participants who've been patiently waiting to hear more from us and also ask questions. And I'd like to remind all the participants that they can continue asking questions on the chat, in the chat box, as well as at the end of the panel. So Melis, what do you think needs to be done by policymakers? What else is on the table according to you?
Well, there's been quite a lot said that I would also like to reflect upon, but I think I can maybe combine these elements. When we were talking about like the determinants, how like voting is like the income highly like, or the education level, the income level affects, and when we are talking about migrants and refugees, also the how long they have resided also is in line with the voting behavior, which is related also what Yonous had said, the feeling of belonging, which is very important. If you don't feel part of a community, a society, then why would you want to have the effort to influence, to participate, to vote? I think this is one of the essentials when we are talking about also voting behavior and the upcoming elections. Who feels belonging? And this is something also what the policymakers can also take forth. How can we enhance the feeling of belonging with our encounterments, with our decision-making structures, procedures? How can we be more inclusive? How can we welcome newcomers better? I think that should be one of the main points. Another thing I would like to add also is about what Thomas said about the importance of the spokespeople. Once again, it's representation matters, and we need migrant refugee leaders as spokespeople themselves, but it is not only enough to pick strong leaders and throw them out there, because once again, what Yonous said, there's discrimination out there, there's tokenism out there. So how do we make sure to create a safe and a supporting environment for those spokespeople? How do we make sure they don't have a mental breakdown? The mental health of also the know-how of mental health is very, very important when we're talking about not only migrant leaders and refugee leaders and the communities, but also the whole structure of even the integration, how much it is built, leaving behind the aspect of mental health. For example, I want to highlight the importance of also mental health in the big picture here, which is very much related to belonging as well. And in terms of, again, voting, people vote on the basis of their feelings and emotions at the end. There's a very small minority group who do their research, who are aware of what's why they are voting, what are the political decisions to be made, and how the structure works. At the end of the day, one can change even their idea who to vote based on their emotions and feelings. And now there's the momentum. Since the Ukrainian crisis in Europe, there are emotions at stake. What's happening in Gaza and in Israel, there are emotions and feelings at stake. And I think this crisis is going to be reflected on the upcoming elections. But what we should do is to channel those emotions into right participation methods. And it's not always the feeling of maybe belonging that drives people to vote, but also the frustration. That can be a good motive to use our democratic rights to participate in the upcoming elections. And what current policymakers could do here is not to suffocate those emotions, those actions that are taking place, but create safe platforms for them to flourish and be channeled in a positive way, rather than those emotions and people being marginalized and named and helping or driving the society to polarize. Instead of doing that, there needs to be the platforms where we can talk about what's happening and what it means for different communities.
Very well put, Melis. Thank you so much. And now we turn to Yonous. Maybe you'd like to continue where you left on this belonging, which Melis also elaborate on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it is that for me it is the most important point. It means that I connected with, which is connected, of course, with when we're speaking about integration. It means an effective a policy of integration, actually a policy of an inclusive society, which creates this sense of belonging, which Melis also insisted on that. I think it is really important. And of course, some other points that I can say, which is again, I can say this trust, that it is really important that from our point, for example, now we had before 2 weeks, we had a national election. So the good news is that we had from many parties call in our office to have to introduce them candidates, but the bad news is that actually there was no candidates. You see that we couldn't find from communities peoples to run for this election, local election, because there is a kind of distrust to this political system. It means that even the communities that they have the right, they don't want to vote. So I think it is something not just because of the background of migrants and people with migrants and refugee background, and also this polarization environment that we can see now here. It creates a kind of fear also to the voters. Other things, I think understanding the politician, this cultural sensitivity that we call it, that they should understand the cultures and also the northern values of different communities. And also communities are also different communities from different backgrounds, different cultures from different parts of the world. We should understand that when we speak about migrants and refugee people with migrant background, it is not that all of them the same. That's very obvious. So, and what Thomas said, I think it's very important that how to engage communities in campaigns, not just in campaigning the actions of the campaigns, and also how to organize and how to make these campaigns. That is also very important. The other point, it is I think the media and which channels to use in order to mobilize communities. It is also important to say that in mainstream media, there is no discussion actually on the importance of new European voters. Actually, that's and also to not forget that how to use most of the time in the time of elections the issue of migration coming out, which works negatively. That how we should be careful on that also. The other thing which Melis also said, I think how to speak more about diversity in the society, and how to explain this, and how to emphasize on this diversity and celebrate this diversity with the communities and also with locals, and finding a way how to make this. And the last one, I think, which is the follow-up. I think it is something that most of the time politicians are forgetting, actually, when the election finished and the communities and the voters are forgotten. That is something that I think it is we should take care of. This political or this electoral process, it is a continuous. It's, of course, it is every 4 years, every 5 years, but it has a follow-up to not forget voters after the elections, either you win the election or not. It means that the politicians, they should approach these communities and to speak about their problems and to see what are the issues. I think these are really important. Of course, some important issues and also the issue of who to vote. I think it is important. Of course, I think in our campaign, it is not to speak just about the importance of to vote, and also to inform about the not to say that whom to vote, and to explain and to increase the knowledge about the candidates, the parties even. Who are these parties that they are running and they are asking for the vote? Of course, we see the issue of this information, which is really important. And I saw myself, the communities that I approached, and some of them, they were approached just to say that, yeah, your family has problem with document issue, that if I win, I will solve that. So it is a kind of disinformation, of course. So how can be informed very well on all issues of the election, not just to vote, and also to know whom to vote. I think it is really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yonous. Asif, how would you react to this? What else needs to be done by policymakers to address the participation gap?
Yes, very nice points already raised, and I would just say that coming from the point that, as I mentioned, that the confidence building is very important, and it goes from local to the European level, because if one is not comfortable to vote on the local body elections or the national elections, so how the person will vote for the European level? And for that, very important is that representation is made, and representation is only made in a proper way of advocacy. So it's not only the job of a single entity or the non-profit organizations or the advocates or activists, but it's also the local governments and the national governments, as well as the European Parliament and European bodies should also get involved to educate about it, since Europe is not represented by the ethnic Europeans only, but also a very big chunk of migrants, refugees, new Europeans in different various ways, and undocumented and stateless people. So all these kind of advocacy efforts should not go only on the local level or on one level, but also on a large scale. As well as the confidence building should be made between the migrant themselves or the newcomers themselves, because as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, that there was only one party that contested in the election, and they were not representing all cities or many cities of Sweden, but they were only first time in election, and they were able to get 2 local seats in the big cities, which means that it is clearly obvious that migrants are going for the place where they feel trusted. And this kind of trust level is incredible and important, in a sense that if one is migrant, he or she will feel more confident with the migrant community than going directly to the European ethnic person. And that's why all these right campaigns and ideas are nowadays producing, because the confidence building measures are usually ignored, and eventually it is giving a kick back to the effectiveness of European elections at large, and on the local level elections as well. So this is a very something that I feel is very important. And then it is also important that the newcomers to the society, or the new Europeans, believe that they are part of society and they can make change. Their vote counts, and not only counts, but it has an effect. And they should have the confidence that they stand by themselves and have a say in the policy making as well. I've been part of European Migration Forum for the 3rd time this year. It will be in December, and only this time only migrants are able to influence the policy making in Europe on European level. So imagine that policies are made for migrants, refugees, and they have not been part of it for so many years. How can they trust the policy that is already created for them? the different policies that our different European countries have already made, and there is a gap between the European policy as well as the local policies made by the countries. So these kind of questions are creating a more distrustful situation, as well as the political scenario in the country, when some political parties, especially in the western part of Europe, are like the more right political parties are on verge, and the kind of policies and ideas they are promoting is not only scaring the newcomers, but also they feel that they can be kicked out of the country at any time without any information, and they even don't know, because not everyone is having the possibility to get educated on a large scale. So the people are already scared. And if you talk about them, like generally about elections, how can they take that European elections are very important for their future and for their kids' future to live in Europe. So my point of view come on the confidence measures, and I feel it should be developed in a more holistic way. Thank you.
That brings us back to the issue of trust. Thank you very much for emphasizing these governance building measures. With this, I'll turn to Thomas for his reaction to what needs to be done by policymakers.
Sure. Well, I think it's important to come back to the point that it's only really in elections that people start to realize what the institutional and structural obstacles are, and then it becomes too late to address them during the election. So it's really important that allies and leaders identify what those obstacles are, get parties to answer whether or not they're going to change those in the future, and then when there's the right political opportunity, put in a lot of effort to get those obstacles removed. So, for example, voter registration should be automatic for all new citizens, for all mobile voters. And I know that the European Commission is trying to work on this for mobile EU citizens. This needs to be addressed. But what can happen in the meantime? So at least in campaigns that I've been involved in, we still have the fundamental reality that most eligible immigrant voters don't vote because they don't get the right information in time on how and why to vote. There's a lot that we can do there already. First, I'd say authorities need to provide official, multilingual information, simple, frequently asked questions, very short, because then we as leaders and communities can point to that. So when people say, oh no, I'm worried that I'm going to lose my right to vote in my own home country, or no, I'm worried I'm going to get a fine, or I hear that the documentation is really complicated, we can show them this is what the government is saying in your language. That can help a lot. As Melis said, can also help if anyone who has access to voter rolls sends direct letters recognizing the contributions that newcomers have already made and giving them that kind of quick information, maybe even giving them the application form directly so that they take action directly. They can offer these types of trainings. I would say they should be very open to whoever is interested in the community, including potential candidates, because you can train candidates in a non-partisan way and find new volunteers, new leaders within our communities that really want to prioritize this issue. This is all going to require money, and our integration policymakers really don't invest in new voters, and our democratic leaders don't either. The most effective methods of reaching new voters cost about 30 euros per voter. And even when they reach someone, it only convinces 1 in 10 or maybe 1 in 15. So you need a budget. The countries that actually are regularly reaching out to new voters do this, and Europe is kind of waking up to being a more diverse democracy. So making these funds available as soon as possible at whatever level you're operating at, and giving them directly to immigrant-led organizations will be, I think, a key step to get any of these actions off the ground.
Thank you, Thomas. And we're ready to hear the recommendations from Ojeaku that we left off at.
Yeah, thank you. I think for us, it is really about looking at what we can do, what the political parties can do to ensure that they have more diverse candidate lists. And they could actually do some of that work now. If they have, they need to review them and make sure that those lists are as diverse as possible, and if they are not, then it's a real shame, and we will call them out on that. So I think this is one thing that is really important, and I think then we need to follow through. I think some of the panelists have already mentioned how to support parliamentarians once they're in position, because it can be a very difficult space. We haven't talked very much about social media, but there is a lot of online hate and disinformation that targets people in public life, in political offices. And I think there can be more done really around how to keep people safe online and challenge disinformation and hate, because this is actually becoming a problem to the point of it's impacting on our democratic principles. Many of us do not want to engage in social media when there is so much hate on there. So there should be more mechanisms to have, some kind of removal of hate, especially around the elections, some monitoring and removal of hate, because I think people disengage when there is so much hate online. And many of us, whilst I agree that the face-to-face campaigning and engagement is really important, many of us get a lot of our information through social media and online. But if it's a toxic space, then people won't engage. And a lot of the work that we will be doing is on social media. So there are some practical things here around challenging hate speech and making sure that people can engage on social media. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of our recommendations for policymakers, and also then to engage with our roundtables that we will be organising and make sure that they are committed to discussing the issues that we want discussed, and we will be organising these events over the next year. And I think that would help, specifically from our perspective as a European organisation. But really, actually, on a personal level, I mean, I don't really want to dox myself, but I actually don't have the right to vote for the European elections in 2024. And this just goes to show you how structurally exclusionary some of these mechanisms can be, and how important it is to have civil society organizations that can help individuals like myself to go through processes, whether it's the citizenship process, whether it's the registration process, so that they can have the opportunity to vote. And I'm going to need that support as well from somebody in Belgium. I don't know. I hope they can give, I hope they can give me citizenship in time so I can vote in next year.
Great. Great note to finish on. And I actually would like to just reassert what you said, that actually there are many studies that show that all of this negative campaigning and creating an effort of an area of hate and negative feelings has quite negative effects on turnout in general, regardless of the migration background. And without losing any time, I'd like to thank you very much and turn to the audience for a couple of questions. I did get permission from the next session for 2-3 questions, and we have actually already one from Kyriakos Lefkopoulos, who is asking about the ways to mitigate perceived political cost from the part of the national political parties, and perhaps how that could affect the European Parliament elections in 2024. I believe the perceived political costs of engaging the migrants or investing in political participation. Is that the question, Kyriakos? Maybe you can.
If I may, yes. In fact, how perhaps the national parties perceive that engaging with people from a mobility background could be, in fact, be perceived by the other voters as a political cause, which is sometimes, usually, especially in Greece, a very heated topic, because usually you can see in one parties perhaps trying to support people with mobility background, but they fear a lot of the backlash. It is the first thing that they have in mind. So perhaps how could we mitigate that fear? In which way, if perhaps some of the panelists can help? And if this motion could help in the end create different perspectives and discourses through the European Parliament elections in 2024, if this helps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a great question. Maybe we can collect one or more questions, 2 questions from the audience before turning to our panel for their reactions to these questions.
On top of my head, my first reaction is, if I understood the question correctly, is keeping also things in political terms intersectional. When the political parties actually, in an ideal world, it shouldn't be approach to refugees and migrants only, but refugees and migrants are heterogeneous groups. They are mothers, they are, workers, employers, marginalized groups, in other terms, either socially, economically vulnerable or at, other positions. So migrants and refugees should be represented at all groups within the society. If we would achieve that, also any other sort of voter would not be pinpointing that and asking maybe questions, why are you talking to this specific group? But political parties should, or they want to win, they want power, and they want to get their votes from all sorts of parts of the societies. Yes, there are also specific needs groups of migrant and refugees, which we also represent and remind. But how do we build the alliances with also other actors that together we can have that dialogue? I think that is one way to go around your question, if I understood it correctly.
You are muted, Başak, sorry.
My apologies. I was wondering if there are any other reactions to this question, or anyone from the audience who'd like to ask another question. Please just turn your microphones off.
Okay. Can I intervene also? Sorry. I think, if I understand well also the question, I think the first, when we speak about the voters with migrants and background, and they should vote, they are not voting as migrants and refugees. They are voting as parts of the society. I think this is something that should we understand. Either that they are candidate also. So it is we should not put this issue, and sometimes the parties, they are doing that, the issue of they and we, which is really dangerous. So it is the issue of communication, how political parties, they are communicate their policy in order to not have political cost. And the second, which is I think very important, that this policy of fear, of even because of this shifting your policy, I think, and getting out of your main political view, it is something that it doesn't move. That is the biggest danger that we have in the society. If you look to this, it means that already you are lost. I think it is the way that political parties should look to. I can understand that in Greece, of course, it is those who are speaking about a policy of pro-migrants, and then they have a political cost. But it doesn't mean that these parties, they should not have these pro-migrants what they believe actually. So the problem is that if you are afraid of this this political cost and also shifting your policy, I think that is what is happening, and it is the biggest fear in all European Union. What we see, I think, in all it is the biggest fear that we see. I see not as a migrant and refugee. I see as European. I am a Greek citizen, so it is what I see. If I can understand, thank you very much.
Thank you. And actually, it does speak to the other question that we had in the chat box on bridging the broken trust as well. Well, with this, I'm going to have to finalize this part of the program. We are a bit over time, but it was a very inspiring discussion for me, and I'm sure it was for the participants who have patiently stayed there and followed us. And I'd like to thank you very much wholeheartedly for your reflections.